UFC 294 is behind us from Abu Dhabi this Saturday with a title fight atop the marquee and a lot of weirdness in between. My name is Brian Campbell, one half of your Morning Combat award-winning co-hosting duo, and it was a lightweight title rematch. The rematch of a super fight just 8 months ago, the first time when Islam Makhachev defended his lightweight title against featherweight king Alexander Volkanovski. There was some dispute in the scoring, of course, as Volkanovski, fighting on home soil in Australia, came up just short in a close unanimous decision defeat. The fallout of that certainly had a lot to say about the larger pound for pound debate, where even though UFC put John Jones, the new heavyweight champion, atop its list, most pundits seem to argue between Makhachev and Volkanovski, including myself on CBS Sports, keeping Volkanovski in that top spot. Well, this rematch certainly was anticipated, but was part of a larger story of the card where three of the biggest fights fell apart with less than 2 weeks to go, although big name replacements saved the day. In this case, that was Alexander Volkanovski on just 12 days notice, knowing that this is a difficult fight to make a second time. He slid in with the opportunity, of course, to double down on his legacy, but it would not be his night on this evening. The second title defense at lightweight for Makhachev, it was a dominant one. First round knockout, 3 minutes and 6 seconds in versus high left leg head kick, a thing of beauty. But for as much as Volkanovski didn't come in with the 5-round cardio, was very vocal about not just his confidence in that he was going to win this fight, but his willingness and knowing potentially the necessity that he was going to have to walk through Makhachev to do that. Well, Volkanovski was never really able to get out of first gear. I think the best news in this case for the critical value of Makhachev's win is that this wasn't necessarily about a lack of cardio or some of the elements that played in here on the short turnaround. This was about the bigger, longer fighter in Makhachev really just acting that part and not giving Volkanovski the same level of respect that maybe at times he did in the first fight. Makhachev held distance perfectly, using some hard calf kicks early on and establishing himself by kicking Volkanovski to the body. It lowered the output of Volkanovski, who was circling around, but as you saw, really unable or maybe unwilling to let his hands go to put himself into danger until he got comfortable. The problem for him in this case is he never did get comfortable. Although Volkanovski stuffed an early takedown attempt from Makhachev, you saw the bigger fighters sort of control the two in the clinch. And once they were separated by referee, it was set up time for the finishing strike. This was a high kick with the left leg that Makhachev nearly hit in the opening minute of the fight that Volkanovski was able to avoid, but it seemed in a way like he was almost lucky to, like he happened to be moving his head in the right direction as the kick just barely went by it. Second chance, though, was perfectly on point, knocking Volkanovski down, seemingly putting him potentially out in the moment, but it was the follow-up strikes of ground and pound as Volkanovski was trying to recuperate and rise that led to the stoppage finish. For Makhachev, no more debate about the pound for pound. And if you want to debate John Jones, that's fine, but I think you have to consider the nature in which he put away Gane, how quick and how early after the long layoff. Across the board, recent history, what have you done for me lately? Islam Makhachev has stopped Charles Oliveira, outlasted Alexander Volkanovski in a classic 8 months ago this same calendar year, and has now beat Volkanovski again, this time by knockout. Good enough on my list for your new pound for pound king. And I think when you look at the future, he didn't want to commit to any opponent saying, look, that's Dana White's job. I'm going to fight who you line up. It's always going to be hard for Makhachev coming directly out of the shadow of the retirement of his teammate Khabib Nurmagomedov, giving up his title, putting it on the, down. Of course, we had a transitional in between champion and Charles Oliveira, who made a lot of noise. But once Makhachev was ready, these are the type of wins, that produce highlight reel videos for him and that really begin to separate him on his own. Right now, I think he's the best fighter in the game. And what else could he have showed you to prove that? Just pure perfection in his execution and game planning to get Volkanovski out of there. And, I've had a lot of debate with Luke Thomas, my partner on Morning Combat this week, over just that. Should there be, in this case, a hall pass for Volkanovski for saving the event, taking the money, taking his big swing to try to come in and double down on his legacy? You're going to give him a pass in a lot of ways for the loss. And I think luckily for him, it wasn't extremely devastating, right? He wasn't knocked out cold or heavily damaged or really largely exposed. In this case, he got caught, and maybe the better fighter overall has now proven over 2 fights and 5.5 rounds that he truly is the better fighter. But for Volkanovski, I think you got to be disappointed that you couldn't get out of first gear, that you couldn't even come out and maybe fight a little bit more reckless and less calculated than normal. That as Volkanovski tried to circle, tried to figure out sort of his opening salvo, was really unable to in a somewhat disappointing way. He was very emotional at the press conference afterwards in talking about the decision making that went into taking this. We know Makhachev had really played it up as a money grab only, but I certainly applaud the attempt at history by Volkanovski, knowing that these opportunities, they don't come around often. He took it, but boy, did he come up empty in the end. Let's go to that co-main event. We're ready to fit Khamzat Chimaev with the robe and the crown as the next big thing in the sport. And in this case, the middleweight division, a division in some ways he was sort of forced into after the unexplainable huge weight miss against Nate Diaz in his last outing late last year on pay-per-view. Remember the last minute opponent switch there. He ends up destroying Kevin Holland. But in a lot of ways, that whole circumstance, conspiratorial or not, and how you look at it, put a little pause on the idea that Khamzat, the star of the pandemic when he made his debut in 2020 with 3 highlight reel devastating wins, to finally sort of put his flag down. New division, yes, but still that same guy that's coming on. He's a destroyer. He's not afraid to play the villain. He wants to come in here and seize the title. Well, he's going to get that opportunity to seize the title because he survives, advances, and wins here via majority decision over another late replacement in Kamaru Usman. But I don't think he's going to enter that title shot with a lot of momentum or a lot of, let's say, positivities. There were certainly some positives here, which went a long way in giving the win for Chimaev. But when you consider the narrative, maybe the media was being too harsh on Usman, playing up the whole questions about his knees and the health of that. 36 years old, moving up in weight, coming off of 2 straight defeats. All of those were legitimate questions. But I have to actually, in hindsight, kind of applaud Usman for coming in here, gutting it out, surviving a disastrous round 1, and nearly pulling off an upset surprise win. Nearly, but look, 2 judges giving it 2 rounds to 1 for Khamzat, plus that added point of a 10-8 opening round. But 1 judge, the 3rd judge, scoring it even overall, which is 2 out of 3 rounds in the favor of Usman. And then, of course, that 10-8 round forcing the draw. How much criticism should we throw at Chimaev? Well, let's also point out something he said off the top in the press conference, that he felt he hurt his right hand, injured it in round 1, and was unable to really use it the rest of the way. Does that check out? It does. But with that said, it's hard not to look at what Chimaev did, coming out so aggressive, nearly finishing Usman early with ground and pound, and then turning it into multiple submission attempts. Yes, there was a brief escape from Usman where he was able to get Chimaev off his back by dumping him in real time. It looked like Chimaev landed down hard face first. Actually, if you watch the replay, it looks like Usman actually landed face first and took the worst of that. But you got to give Usman a lot of credit for resetting in round 2. But you can't mention that without mentioning the cardio dump that Chimaev showed. He was all too willing in round 2 to really just circle from the outside, do some passive boxing, and really allow Usman the opportunity to steal the round, regain his composure, and get himself back in the fight after carrying Chimaev's weight for so long in round 1. In round 3, yes, we did see Chimaev. Now we know he had the injured right hand, and we saw him push the pace a little bit more, try to take the fight to the ground. But I didn't see the nastiness. I didn't see the times that Usman stepped up to him and landed big strikes. I didn't see the type of answers from Chimaev that showed that he was completely in control in that type of 2-way action. And really, I saw a situation where could Chimaev go right from here, go into a fight with Sean Strickland, in which he may or may not be the betting favorite, right? Let's not forget that Strickland's surprising Adesanya in the way he did with that perfect performance. You're going to have questions of if he can do that again. Could he do it again against somebody who can wrestle like Chimaev? A lot of key questions. But I think Chimaev's got way too many of his own now. Look, when Chimaev fights B+ level fighters, C fighters, he's destroying them. He's making it look like it's a pro against an amateur. I mean, what he did to the Leech by picking him up, running him over, slamming him in front of Dana and talking trash, that's like Khabib shit right there. It's like superhero stuff right there. But yet across the board, ultimately, when he steps up to a higher level, the Gilbert Burns matchup 2 fights ago, in which I think more than a few could have made the argument that Burns deserved a decision in that one, as Chimaev seemed to eschew any potential wrestling game plan and was just all willing to throw bombs and go back and forth. He wasn't as willing this time around to do that against Usman. And even when he did step on the gas offensively in the third round, not overly convincing that in this case, in this circumstance, against a aging former champion who probably himself took the fight for the payday, for the opportunity of doubling down on his own resume and legacy, not unlike Volkanovski. He had a chance here to beat Chimaev, get a shot at a second division championship. And in this case, storyline-wise, against a guy he's already beaten in Strickland back when they met at welterweight. So Usman is kind of playing with house money in this matchup. And I feel like the fact that he even went the distance and the fact that Chimaev didn't look like that dude in taking him there, we got some questions moving forward. Rashad Evans talked with us on this week. I was texting him. He mentioned the word bully when talking about Chimaev, and I don't think it was in a compliment sense. And I think that's something part of the early narrative here that Chimaev's going to have to fight his way out of. Is he a bully that when he has the advantage, he can absolutely dominate you? But when people step up and make him fight on much more even terms, can he be that same guy? Only he can answer that over time.